A stunned single-father millionaire watches in disbelief as a waitress helps his disabled son solve a complex financial equation, never imagining those very numbers would save an entire bank and forever bind them together. Hello, my wonderful audience. Get ready for a story that will make your heart tremble. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're swept up by this journey, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's amazing to see people from all around the world joining us today. The little bell above the wooden door tinkled softly as Henry Sullivan pushed it open and stepped into the small diner just off the MIT campus in Boston. The warm autumn morning air was filled with the scent of freshly baked bread and rich coffee, mingling with the low murmur of students' conversations, everyday sounds Henry once found all but alien. Henry was wrapped in a modest ash-gray cashmere coat. His gaze swept the room and settled on a table by the window. Seated beside him was his 10-year-old son, Sam, whose bright face was as still as a windless lake. Sam's large, clear eyes stared off into the distance. He sat in his wheelchair, his hand busy sketching strange symbols on a napkin. Henry sat down and watched his son in silence. Sam inhabited a private world Henry, who could unravel the most complex financial equations, could not reach. As a banking titan, Henry had rescued countless firms from ruin, yet he was utterly powerless against the vast gulf between himself and his son. No one knew that the powerful figure gracing the covers of finance magazines could sit quietly for hours, simply gazing at a napkin filled with incomprehensible symbols. Sometimes Henry wondered if those sequences of numbers were Sam's only way of speaking, but they were far too intricate, as if drawn from a logic only Sam understood. Sam's hand moved faster now, the numbers on the napkin flowing almost instinctively. Henry leaned forward, about to ask what they meant, then stopped himself. He didn't want to interrupt the strange mental current running through his son. A gentle female voice cut through the quiet. "Good morning. What can I get for you two?" Henry looked up to meet the kind smile of the waitress. The honey-blonde woman wore a neatly pressed apron and a name tag that read Clara. Her eyes flicked down to the napkin, then widened in surprise. "A black coffee and a honey butter waffle for me," Henry said. "And for him," he glanced at Sam, who was still sketching, "whatever he likes." Clara knelt to pick up the napkin but froze as her gaze took in the sequence of numbers. Her eyes glazed over in recognition. These figures. She'd seen them before. Not here, not in a diner, but in a financial article she'd read weeks earlier. The unsolved risk assessment algorithm Henry's bank had published. "You drew these?" Clara asked softly, her voice trembling. Henry nodded, bewildered. "He usually draws things I can't make sense of. I thought it was random." Clara studied the rows of digits. They were anything but random. Patterns, symmetries, fragments of the solution to the equation Henry had released. She had studied applied mathematics at MIT before life forced her to abandon her dreams. And now, here was a boy, silent and unseen, producing exactly the insight the bank's analysts lacked. A strange thrill crept through her, a mix of excitement and doubt. She had once dreamed of becoming a financial researcher, but a family crisis had made her set that aside and take work as a waitress. Now, a nonverbal child had sketched what she had longed to uncover. Henry noticed Clara's expression shift. He looked from her to the napkin and back to Sam. A tiny spark of hope ignited in his chest, something he had not dared to imagine. "Clara, you understand these numbers?" he asked quietly. Clara hesitated, then nodded. "I believe They're part of the solution to your financial insight puzzle. And if I'm right, it's a very special solution. Suddenly, the diner's clatter and chatter seemed to fade away. All Henry could hear was his heart pounding and the irresistible pull to learn more. About Sam, about these numbers, and about the woman who had unexpectedly entered their story. That autumn morning, over a cup of coffee and a napkin scrawled with numbers, a mystery began to unravel. And Henry knew. Whatever came next would change everything. The napkin scrawled with Sam's numbers stayed vivid in Henry's mind long after he left the diner that morning. Though he'd faced far larger figures and far more complex calculations, he had never been as haunted by any equation as by those symbols clinging to his thoughts. There was something beyond reason in them, like a message sent from some deep place only Sam could understand. But why was Clara, the waitress with deep brown eyes and a voice like a passing breeze, the one to recognize it? Henry returned to the diner the next afternoon, not for coffee or a waffle, but to learn more about Clara. Jeff, the middle-aged manager, was initially wary but opened up once Henry revealed who he was. Clara, Jeff said. She studied applied mathematics at MIT, one of the brightest students in her class. The professors talked about her all the time. Then her mother fell ill. Late-stage cancer. Clara dropped out immediately to care for her. A few months later, her mother passed away. She never went back. Henry fell silent. It was the story of a promising path shattered by private grief. He thought of Clara's eyes, how they flinched whenever someone tried to peer too deeply. And now he understood why. That evening, Henry found Clara wiping down the counter. The soft golden light highlighted her discreet weariness. Henry approached, this time not as a customer but as someone searching for an answer. "Do you still have any of your old MIT notes?" he asked, his eyes free of judgment, only genuine concern. Clara stiffened, her hands halting mid-wipe. She was silent for a moment, then nodded. "I have an old notebook. I used to jot down equations I loved, mostly just to keep them alive." "I'd like to see it," Henry said softly, as if requesting something sacred. Clara hesitated. She feared opening that notebook. It might throw her back into memories that had once left her adrift. But then she thought of Sam's silent eyes again, those quiet eyes that seemed to carry a secret begging to be heard. That night, in the cramped back room behind the diner, Clara produced a worn cardboard box. Inside lay a tattered leather notebook, its spine cracked, pages yellowed with time. She flipped it open, revealing rows of equations, graphs, and conjectures, a flood of memories rushing back. Henry sat across from her in hushed awe. When Clara pointed to a page whose symbols nearly matched Sam's sequence, he couldn't help but startle. It was exactly that structure, only a few variables changed. It could not be coincidence. "I used to work on that model, a variant of the probability algorithm. But I never perfected it," Clara whispered, her fear of those rediscovered memories palpable. "Sam, that boy seems to intuitively sense that structure. Maybe it's instinct. Maybe it's genius. But I need your help to understand it," Henry said, his voice urgent in a way Henry Sullivan rarely allowed himself to be. Clara clutched the notebook to her chest. Part of her wanted to retreat, lock away those numbers again and return to life's safety behind the counter. But another part, the part that had once dreamed of decoding the world through mathematics, stirred stronger than ever. "I'm not sure I have the courage to go back," she confessed. "You won't be alone," Henry promised. "We'll start anew, together with Sam." A long silence followed, then Clara nodded. Not a full agreement, but the first step. a quiet acceptance that she would not run away again. That evening, under the soft glow of a single lamp and amid the pages of that battered notebook, an unexpected alliance formed. A father haunted by regret, a child living in silence, and a young woman who had buried her talent beneath a gray apron. None of them knew they stood on the threshold of something extraordinary, where the cracks in their pasts might become the very paths to redemption. Henry Sullivan's office occupies the top floor of a glass tower in downtown Boston, where daylight filters through broad windows, reflecting off polished marble floors. It is the realm of billion-dollar deals, where decisions made in minutes can alter the fate of an entire empire. But today, the room normally reserved for strategic meetings is set aside for a 10-year-old boy and a young woman carrying a battered backpack. Henry has arranged a private corner of the office, a small desk, a whiteboard, and rows of brightly colored markers neatly organized. Sam sits beside Clara, his eyes initially hesitant, but no longer as distant as on that first morning at the diner. Clara is gentle and patient. She asks no pressing questions and makes no demands. She simply lays a blank sheet of paper and a pencil in front of him, then sits quietly at his side. Gradually, Sam begins to write. At first, only scattered symbols appear, but Clara understands. Each stroke is its own form of speech, a distinct way of telling a story. She carefully records each sequence of numbers, then uses colored pens to transform them into simple diagrams, circles, arrows, networks, visual structures Sam can see with his hands. And then the miracle happens. Sam gives a slight, shy smile. For the first time, Clara witnesses that smile, soft as a breeze yet brimming with strength. Henry stands farther back, outside the glass door, observing their every gesture. Sam, the boy he has struggled for years to reach, is now smiling. Because of numbers. Because someone understands him. In the afternoons that follow, their sessions become routine. Clara arrives around 3 o'clock, bringing her notebook and a small bag of snacks for Sam. They work together like true collaborators. Sam continues to write while Clara redraws the structures. She even teaches him a simple new notation system, a numeric chart adapted for deaf children, to help Sam express his emotions more clearly. Each time Sam nods or points, Henry feels as though another broken piece within his heart is healing. One rainy afternoon, as Clara flipped through fresh sheets of paper, she accidentally knocked over an old dossier tucked beneath her glass-topped desk. It was the file Henry had locked away months ago, a complex problem about a risky loan he'd never been able to solve. Curious, Clara sat down to examine it more closely. And then, she froze. The sequences of numbers Sam had been writing during their sessions matched almost exactly the optimization model Henry had pursued. Only Sam had transformed it, adding a hidden variable, tweaking a probability coefficient, so that the entire structure became more coherent, more efficient. Clara immediately snapped a photo of the model and redrew it on the whiteboard. Sam saw the sketch, his eyes brightened, and he added a small arrow, a breakthrough in the solution. Clara drew a sharp breath, her heart pounding. Sam was not just a prodigy, he was guiding her. The boy saw patterns as a flowing stream, unhindered by formal theory or conventional limits. That gift let him reach the goal faster. When Clara presented the revised model to Henry, he said nothing. His eyes were fixed on the diagram, on his son's handwriting, on Clara's hand, trembling with emotion. He felt his chest tighten, not from sorrow, but from a new belief. The future he had once deemed impossible was now unfolding before him. Sam, the once silent and distant child was connecting, through numbers, through Clara, and quietly with his own father. Henry stepped closer and placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "Thank you," he said. "Not just for the numbers, but for touching a place in me I could never reach." Clara smiled, her gaze still on Sam. "That boy doesn't need someone to decode him. He needs someone willing to listen. And I believe you are that person." In that high-rise office, once filled only with the click of keyboards and the ticking of clocks, now rang the scratch of pencils, the rustle of paper, and soft nods of understanding. A family, not yet whole, not yet healed, but slowly forming from very different pieces. Sam's journey to unlock his genius is not merely a story of mathematics. It is a story of connection, of healing, and of having faith in the impossible. And sometimes, the greatest miracles begin with a scrap of paper and a first, shy smile. Dear viewers, take a moment to relax or sip some water, and stay tuned for what happens next. Comment 1. If this story moved you, so we know you're still with us. Henry had never imagined someone like Clara could unsettle him so deeply. Not because of her beauty, although her eyes held a strange allure, but because of the inner stillness she carried. She didn't strive to prove her brilliance, yet in every word she spoke and every way she cared for Sam, Henry recognized something he'd long since lost: patience, trust, and unconditional affection. He began to admire her not merely for her intellect, something he had always prized, but for the way she made Sam's face light up. The boy had never grown close to anyone like this. Clara didn't speak much. She showed no pity. She offered no empty consolations. But precisely that enabled Sam to open up. Each time Sam completed a sequence of numbers and earned Clara's approving smile and nod, Henry felt another piece of the boy's wounded heart heal, and his own as well. When Clara suggested applying Sam's numeric sequences to the bank's restructuring plan, Henry hesitated. He was backed into a corner, shareholders pressuring him daily, financial reports flashing red, market confidence eroding. Yet amid all that chaos, Henry feared one thing. If the experiment failed, what would become of Sam? The boy trusted no one but Clara. If his formula couldn't save the bank, if they dismissed it as child's play, would Sam keep writing? Would he even smile again? Henry couldn't bear the thought. "I'm scared. If we fail, Sam will think he's not good enough," he confessed to Clara, his voice breaking. Clara looked at him, her eyes free of reproach, only understanding. "Don't you believe in him?" "I do. But, I don't believe in myself. I fear I'll destroy something precious again." For the first time in a long while, Henry admitted his weakness. He, the man who made billion-dollar decisions amid financial storms, now felt small when face to face with two people who had entered his life without any plan. Clara said nothing more. She simply laid her hand over his. No consolation, only a silent promise that she was here, and she understood. In that hush, something blossomed. As their lips met, softly, deliberately, neither thought of the consequences. Only the truth. They needed each other. But the moment that kiss ended, Clara recoiled. In her eyes there was no anger, only fear. I can't risk failing again," she whispered, almost to herself. "I lost everything once betting on love. If I'm wrong this time, I don't know if I can endure it." Henry remained silent. He understood. He had feared the same. Yet when Clara walked away without looking back, he felt a part of himself walk out the door with her. In the days that followed, Sam grew quiet. He stopped writing numbers, stopped sketching. He sat before the whiteboard but wouldn't pick up the marker. Henry tried to talk, to coax him, but Sam gazed off into the distance, as if the light Clara had sparked in him had flickered out. Henry felt utterly helpless, not because of numbers or business models, but because for the first time in his life, he couldn't use logic or money to protect what mattered most. He had thought shielding Sam from risk was the answer, but now he understood. What Sam needed wasn't absolute safety, but someone daring enough to enter his world without fear of getting lost. And only Clara had ever done that. Henry stood at the window, his heart in turmoil. He had never imagined love could blossom amid such crushing pressure. Yet now, between the fear of bankruptcy and the ache of losing that fragile bond with his son, he thought of only one thing. He must find Clara again. Not just to save the bank, but to save them both. Henry couldn't wait any longer. Clara had been gone from his and Sam's life for too long. Sam no longer wrote, no longer smiled. In the days without Clara, the room that once rang with the scratch of pencils and Sam's soft laughter had grown heartbreakingly empty. Henry knew that if he didn't find her again, they would lose the only thing that had ever made life meaningful. That morning, he brought Sam back to the little diner where it all began. The boy sat silently, clutching a new drawing. No one knew when he had completed it. Clara was wiping down a table, her movements slow and heavy. Her hair was hastily tied back, her eyes were hollow. When she looked up and saw them, the rag in her hand froze mid-air. Sam stepped forward, said nothing, and held out the paper to her. Clara took it, slowly unfolded it. On it were the familiar numbers, but this time arranged into a complete chart. An optimal, coherent structure. A summons. From Sam, from Henry, from everything she had tried to forget. Clara looked at Sam, her lips trembling. The boy gave a small nod. No words were spoken, but everything was understood. She gripped the paper tightly, as if it were her ticket back to herself. Before Clara could speak, Henry's phone rang. A notification from the bank's board. The restructuring plan based on Sam's model has been selected for presentation at the National Finance Conference in Boston. Henry looked up at Clara, his eyes shining, not with pride but with possibility, the chance for all three of them to step back into the light. Clara, still trembling, still afraid, but this time instead of stepping back, she whispered, "I'll help Sam." What followed was a whirlwind of intense preparation. Clara and Sam reviewed every equation, refined every graph. She slept little, but never complained. Henry stood by, offering support but never intruding. He knew this was their space, the space of a girl reclaiming her dreams, and a boy finally heard. The day of the conference arrived. Boston's grandest auditorium was packed. Under bright lights, among expensive suits and skeptical gazes, on the stage sat a 10-year-old boy with hearing loss beside the former MIT student turned waitress. Clara stood next to Sam, her heart racing. She glanced down at the audience. There was Henry, nodding encouragement. She took a deep breath and began her presentation. Her voice was neither loud nor theatrical, but clear and heartfelt. She explained the number sequence, how Sam had devised it, how it modeled cash flow volatility, how each variable was tuned to manage risk. She demonstrated how this optimization could not only rescue a failing bank, but also open new strategic horizons. A hush fell, then a single clap, then another. The hall erupted. The board chair climbed the stage and shook Clara's hand. We've never seen a model that solves such problems with both precision and humanity. The plan is approved immediately. Clara stood trembling, tears streaming down her cheeks, not from triumphant joy, but from having conquered her fear. She had dared to believe in herself again. Below the stage, Henry approached. In a low voice, as he took her hand, he whispered, "You didn't just save the bank. You saved our future." Clara turned to Sam. The boy squeezed her hand. He said nothing, but his eyes shone brighter than ever. In that moment she understood. She was no longer the dropout student, nor the waitress fleeing her past. She was a woman who had rediscovered her purpose through a silent boy and a grieving father. They needed no more words. From now on, they would write the next chapters together, not with fear, but with trust. Henry stood quietly in the small MIT classroom, the glow from the whiteboard reflecting on his face. Where lines of fatigue and anxiety once etched deep, now softened by a relieved smile. Before him, Sam sat in his wheelchair, holding a custom number chart gift he had designed for Clara Bennett. Though the tiny scribbled figures appeared random, their neat order testified to the gifted talent Sam possessed, an ability once hidden and recognized only by Clara. Clara stood beside them, no longer the waitress in a gray apron who once bent to wipe tables in that little Boston diner. Now she wore a simple blouse, her eyes shining with a newfound confidence and peace. She had stepped out of her past's shadows, the fear of failure, her mother's sudden death, her shattered faith in mathematics, and her heart now beat not in panic, but in simple happiness. Sam looked at Clara, then held out the number chart to her. He said nothing, but his bright eyes spoke volumes. Clara took it, her hand trembling as if she held an entire new chapter of her life, a chapter she had long stopped dreaming of. Mathematics had once haunted her, recalling the helplessness she felt as her mother slipped away. But now those numbers no longer carried pain. They had become a language of love that she, Henry, and Sam were learning together. Henry watched that moment, his chest suddenly lighter, as if the burden of lonely years had finally dropped away. He had long lived under the fear of not being good enough as a father, that Sam would remain trapped in a silent world he could never enter. Then Clara appeared, not to rescue them, but through her quiet patience. She had pulled both father and son out of darkness with her love and understanding. Henry stepped forward and drew from his suit pocket a small, carefully wrapped object, a pin bearing a parabola. More than a math symbol, it represented the journey they had shared, a curve plunging through adversity, then rising toward the light. He placed it in Sam's hand, then looked to Clara. No words were needed as he took her hand, warm yet trembling slightly, as if entrusting everything to her. Clara tightened her grip on the pin, tears glistening in her eyes. It felt surreal, as though she were holding in her palm the dream she once thought irreparably broken, now whole and vibrant. MIT had once been a past she dared not revisit. But here, in this room, between Sam and Henry, all she had lost was returning, not in triumphant fanfare, but in the quiet rebirth of trust. Sam began writing a new number sequence on the board, his hand steady but deliberate. Clara watched closely, and almost instinctively she sketched matching charts beside him. Each time her diagram aligned with Sam's numbers, her heart raced. For the first time, she truly felt that each number was more than an expression. It was the heartbeat of belief, of human connection. Henry, standing behind them, observed as though witnessing a symphony conducted in light. He whispered, softly but clearly, "You didn't just solve the equation. You solved our lives." Sam turned to look at his father and Clara, a single character, his final flourish on the board, a period that closed one sequence but opened an entirely new chapter. Henry gazed at it, then at Clara. They were no longer three strangers brought together by a crumpled napkin in a diner. They were family. Family. Not by blood or names, but by being truly seen, truly believed in, and truly loved in one's difference. Their story doesn't end here. For every new sequence Sam writes is another door to the future. Every time Clara takes his hand is another bridge across the impossible. And in each step Henry walks beside them is the affirmation that true happiness lies not in success, but in the journey we dare to trust and love again. Thank you for joining us on this story. If it has touched your heart, please share it with your friends and family across the U.S. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. We'd love to know where and when you're watching this video.